days ago, I got a call from people in Bradford to say that lots of young men had been arrested as a result of the Bradford riots. In fact, some 200 people were arrested. When I went up there, some 400 people turned out at Community Hall, and they were absolutely petrified about what was happening to their sons, because it was mainly young men. And what they said to me was this: what happened is that the Bradford riots had taken place, and the police afterwards had put up Crime Stoppers of photographs of all the people they wanted to arrest. And so mums and dads who were there went to their local lawyers and said, look, my son's photo's on this poster, what shall we do? And the lawyers took the young man down to the police station. The police said, look, we want to interview you about this. You're probably going to get community service. And so they said, yeah, it was me. I threw a couple of stones. They were charged. When they got to court, the recorder of Bradford, who was the most senior judge in Bradford, gave the first person who was sentenced almost 5 years imprisonment, as opposed to what they thought was community service order. So when I turned up there, that person had been sentenced. Now, the recorder, having sentenced somebody to almost 5 years, couldn't turn around and give the next person community service. He was stuck with that. He was stuck with that sentence. So what he decided to do was that everybody came along, he had a prepared statement, and he would read the same thing to everybody that came in front of him, who had to plead guilty because they'd admitted it. And there was a package that every lawyer got. It was the video showing the hour of what person had done, a transcript of it all the rest of it, helicopter views and all the rest of it, this package. And that would be played in court, and the judge would give the little speech, and the only bit that changed was the last paragraph, which said, for you, Mr. X, the sentence is going to be this much. In total, I think almost 200 people. That is, the young men of Bradford had been completely taken out of their communities for years. And so when I went up there, I said, well, you've got lawyers up here. And it was many months, if not about a year later, that I discovered what was happening in Bradford. Bradford was applying to be the cultural city of Britain at the time. Liverpool got it. And so Bradford wanted to show the rest of the world that it was strong on crime and that this would not be allowed to happen. And so they gave sentences which were far in excess of what should have happened. And the business community, the community in Bradford, had all got together to say that what our young people had done was wrong and they should be punished. It was only afterwards that they realised that they'd made such a big mistake, that what they should have done was to support the young people, not completely leave them to the mercy of what was harsh sentences. Coming from the outside, it was easy to look in and to say that what happened was wrong, because these men were getting sentences approaching 5 years. And then you looked at what was happening to football hooligans after matches, and you saw they were getting community punishment for offences which looked far more serious. And I'm talking simply about an individual throwing 1 or 2 stones at police lines. And what the police were saying, this was all started by the Asian community, that about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when the far right were coming along, that the Asian community decided to take the law into their own hands and cause £1 million worth of damage. Anyway, cut a long story short, because what we did is we started to put in appeals. And we said to the people who had been sentenced, look, we'll take on your appeals. And there was a community campaign around it. And they said to the mums and dads, look, let Imran and lawyers from London deal with your appeals. So we took it. The local lawyers were completely unhappy about this because they saw somebody else coming in telling them what to do. It didn't matter. We took the appeals, and by the end of it, we have a particular small firm. We had about 100 appeals altogether. We went through each one, put it all together, and eventually we got to the Court of Appeal in January of whatever year it was, and we had about 5 or 6 appeals that we put together, and we said, right, we want you to deal with this, the Court of Appeal. And we went in front of the second most senior judge of the Court of Appeal, the Vice President of the Court of Appeal, and he made a number of findings. One, most importantly for the Bradford community, was that it was the racists that kicked it all off. That had it not been for the far-right organisation provoking the Asian community, it wouldn't have happened. And this was completely at odds with what the police said. The police, even now, West Yorkshire Police, are really annoyed about that finding. They're still trying to convince the Court of Appeal that was wrong. Secondly, they decided the sentences were too high. And they reduced the sentences. So the sentences that people who came to be sentenced afterwards were then sentenced in accordance with those guidelines. And that's a case called Najib and others. You can find it on the internet. And it's an important case because it sets down the sort of sentences you should get for what happened in these cases. So I'm telling you that because what's happening now is very similar, although it's different circumstances. And I just want to bring you up to date. I remember coming here at a meeting when it was freezing cold, so it's great to come in the warmth, and meeting lots of families. And we had a young man who came to be sentenced. He went to the police station. Very much like the young man in Bradford, he thought he'd go into the police station. And he said, yeah, I did it. I threw a bottle towards the police lines. I didn't hit a police officer, it just threw it towards the embassy. And the police asked him lots of questions. In the end, he admitted everything, he was prosecuted, and he had no choice but to plead guilty. And he did. He was trained to be a dentist. He was sentenced to prison, and we put in the appeal. And then we found out about other families. And what's happened is that we've taken a number of appeals now, and we've got lawyers to put together grounds of appeal, even when their lawyers have said there's no grounds of appeal. We've put them all together. And now what's happening, just to bring you up to date, is that in early July, there'll be a hearing like the Najib hearing in front of probably one of the more senior judges of the Court of Appeal, at which about 9 or 10 appeals will be heard. We've heard of some appeals being successful, some others not being successful. And I know some families are concerned about the delay. It takes time. And just very quickly, just to tell you how an appeal works, it's not automatic from the Crown Court to the Court of Appeal. You have to have a lawyer say that you've got grounds to appeal, and you have to show that the sentence was too high, manifestly excessive. Now, all of that is quite difficult, particularly if you're not dealing with the case at the time, when you're reading cases afterwards. You've got to get the right law to say why in this particular case. So what's been happening, we've been having to get the transcript of what the judge said in relation to each individual. We've been putting that together with the pre-sentence report, with the case papers, putting all that together and getting a barrister to draft grounds of appeal which have gone to the Court of Appeal. Now what happens is that the judge at the Court of Appeal has got to say, yep, you can get on to the next stage, you've got leave to have your appeal heard. What the Court of Appeal have done in this case, they've said, look, what we're going to do, we're going to hear it all together with all of you at the same time. I hope that when we have this hearing, that the Court of Appeal will say that what Judge Dennis was doing was wrong, that he had started too high, in the same way as the recorder of Bradford, Judge Gullick, had got it too high as far as he's concerned. And what we hope that the judge will do, the Court of Appeal will do, is say, in these sorts of cases, where there's protests and this happening and that happening, this is where the judge should have started. And in relation to those 10 cases, the judges will be able to say, you fit into this guideline and your sentence will be reduced. You don't fit into the guidelines, your sentence will stay the same. We don't know what's going to happen in relation to all of those. If we bring the sentence, the starting point down, then we hope that we can bring everybody's sentence down in relation to those involved in the appeal, but more importantly, those are yet to come. Now, if you're not involved in those appeals, or your loved ones are not involved in those appeals, then once the decision's been made, a lawyer can determine whether your appeal is going to be successful or not successful later on, if you want to join it afterwards. It is what I think is going to be what's called a guidance case. It's going to set the framework by which everybody's got to be sentenced. In terms of a campaigning issue, if that's something to be taken on board, once we know the date, then we'll let Joanne and everybody else involved, and then we would welcome as many of you coming down to the Court of Appeal and to show the Court of Appeal the strength of feeling that there is about these particular cases. So